Your face ruins the aesthetic photo, my girlfriend said. After 5 years of paying for her Audi and rent, I walked out of the frame in her life forever. She smirked in the middle of a group photo. Leave the scene. The aesthetic is being ruined by your face. I moved out of frame, continued to walk, got into my car, and drove off without turning around. One of her pals texted me later that evening. She is still in tears. Before we continue with the video, viewers, if you would like to see more stories like this, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. It wasn't until I looked at her Instagram grid that I realized I was a ghost. We had lived together for 4 years and been together for 5. I was there if you scrolled back to 2025. There were fuzzy pictures of us eating tacos on a Tuesday, selfies of us hiking, and captions that utilized my name, Silas. I had soup cooked by Silas. The sink was mended by Silas. Silas and I went on a date. However, I had disappeared if you scrolled up to the last 8 months. At first, the change was subtle. Her hand with a latte took the place of my face. After that, it was just her attire. Then it was her by herself, wearing jewelry I had purchased for her birthday, having lunches I had paid for, and standing in front of places I had taken us to. Also, the captions were updated. The hazy ambitious word salad of the wannabe influencer replaced the date night with Silas. A gentle life era, chasing sunsets, and attracting abundance. I was no longer her boyfriend. Her production crew was me. She maintained that we needed the natural light in our 2-bedroom apartment in the city, and I paid the rent. She refused to drive the Audi since parallel parking made her nervous, even though I had paid the lease. The dinners, the travel, and the investments in her personal brand were all covered by me. As long as I didn't make too much noise or take up too much space on her daily vlog, I was permitted to exist in the background. Cooper then arrived. Cooper and Hazel met at Mixer, a content maker. I had urged her to go since I believed she would benefit from making friends there. She was radiant when she got home. Cooper had a big idea. Cooper was aware of aesthetics. Cooper was a photographer who only used film because he felt that digital was too impersonal. Cooper had never volunteered to buy a drink in his life, was unemployed, and was sleeping on a friend's couch. He treated me like a member of the culinary staff when I initially met him. He had enough silver rings to trigger a metal detector and was dressed in baggy linen pants. We were at a bar on the roof. Naturally, my treat. I just placed a $20 specialty cocktail on my tap, and Cooper says, "So, Silas, you work in logistics, according to Hazel." I mentioned supply chain management. He tilted his head in a rather patronizing manner, didn't he? Business. Incredibly steady. That's excellent. For Hazel to fly, she needs steadiness. Hazel laughed. In fact, she laughed. It was his arm, not mine, that she squeezed. Isn't he really poetic? Silas has a strong left-wing bias. He doesn't truly understand the creative aspect of things. I took my drink and sipped it. Hazel, I understand that the creative aspect of things is expensive. The flight must be paid for by someone. There was a pause in the talk. Hazel gave me a venomous glare. She yelled, "Don't you dare embarrass me in front of the cool kid. Don't be gross about money, Silas. The vibration energy is so low." That was the dynamic. I served as the safety net, the driver, and the wallet. Cooper served as both the inspiration and the proof. Cooper began to appear everywhere throughout the course of the following few weeks. When I arrived home from work, he was at our apartment working with her to come up with ideas for content. On weekends, I drove them to filming sites with him in the passenger seat of my car. In my own relationship, I turned into the third wheel. I made an effort to mention that. I expressed my displeasure to her. I told her that I felt like a living ATM. Without delay, she twisted it. She claimed that I was jealous of her development and insecure. Cooper was gay, according to her. He wasn't. He wasn't asexual either. Or he most certainly wasn't. Just like a sibling, she assured me that I would encourage her aspirations if I truly loved her. And looking the part was a part of that dream. Silas, you have to dress for the life you desire. Once, when critiquing my trousers and polo shirt, she informed me. You're now dressing for a life of mediocrity. I ingested it. I loved the version of her I met 5 years ago, so I forced myself to swallow it. And I kept hoping that girl was still there, hidden beneath a mountain of hashtags and filters. If she eventually made it, I reasoned, she would relax and things would return to normal if I just gave her enough support. I was a fool. It wasn't a scream that reached the breaking point. It took place on a mid-July Saturday. For a month, Hazel had been discussing the Solstice White Party. It took place at a vineyard some 100 miles outside the city, and was an invitation-only affair. It was the summer's biggest IT event. Everyone would be present. She had to impress local influencers and brand representatives. 3 days prior, she informed me, "I need you to drive. Cooper's license is suspended, and I'd like a drink." Cooper is coming, but why? Even though I already knew the answer, I asked. Since he is filming the material, God. Why must you make everything into a battle, Silas? Would you like to attend? I ought to have declined. I ought to have changed the locks, ordered a pizza, and stayed at home. However, I was eager to watch it. I believe that I was secretly curious to see how far she would take it. I wanted to find out if the disrespect had a limit. I said, "I'll drive." It was 90 degrees on the day of the celebration. I wore cut beige chinos and a clean white linen button-down shirt. It was exactly as she had instructed. I felt I looked nice. Cooper and Hazel were in the living room when I entered. They had the appearance of something from a magazine cover. She was wearing a white silk dress with a flowing backless that was probably more expensive than my first automobile. Cooper had on wide-leg, floor-dragging pants and a white mesh blouse. Hazel's lip twisted as she studied me from head to toe. "Are you wearing that?" she inquired. "As you mentioned, it's white linen. It appears businesslike," Cooper added, adjusting his inside sunglasses. "At a work retreat, it's giving it, dude." Hazel lets out a loud, hefty exhale. "Whatever. Connect. Let's simply leave. However, until I check the lighting, Silas, please try to avoid standing right close to me when we arrive. I don't want to ruin the atmosphere." I remained silent. I reached for the Audi's keys. Her purse was carried by me. Cooper's photography equipment backpack was too heavy for him, so I carried it. It was a torturous hour of driving. They took seats at the rear. The driver was me. They gossiped about strangers, laughed at inside jokes, and criticized their pals' Instagram posts. Hazel never once inquired about my week. She looked at me impatiently in the rearview mirror and never once touched my shoulder. We reached the vineyard. It was lovely. White tents, rolling hills, and pricey cars lined the gravel driveway. I put the car in park. I stepped outside and let her in. She didn't express gratitude. She went outside, straightened her dress, and turned to Cooper right away. She grabbed Cooper's arm and murmured, "The light is perfect right now. Before it becomes too busy, let's head to the main door." They moved forward. I trailed behind, clutching Cooper's spare lens and her pocketbook. We walked to the step and did it again. A huge wall of flowers, especially for pictures. People were waiting in a line. Hazel gave her phone to the event's professional photographer when it was our turn. "Okay, Cooper, get in here," she exclaimed. Cooper moved in beside her. They pretended. Blue steel, howdy lips. With frank laughter at nothing in particular. Flash. 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 The photographer turned to face me, and Hazel hesitated before asking, "Does the gentleman want to join?" Her eyes were calculated, and I saw it. She glanced at me, then at Cooper. "Sure," she responded in a strained voice. I intervened, saying, "Come on, Silas." I wrapped my arm around her waist and stood next to her. The woman's waist that I had shared a home with for 4 years. I paid the woman's rent. I grinned. Hazel tensed up. She leaned away from me in Cooper's direction. The camera was elevated by the photographer. "Wait," Hazel replied sharply. She extended a hand. She faced me. Her eyes were devoid of warmth. Just cold, filtered vanity, no love. "Can you really move, Silas?" She spoke loudly enough for the 10 persons behind us in line to hear. "The shot is being crowded by you." Calmly, I responded, "I'm just standing beside you." She rolled her eyes. "Yes, and it appears disorganized. You appear rigid, and the aesthetic is otherworldly. Simply leave the photo. The aesthetic is being ruined by your face. Simply take a position behind the camera." "All right, feel free to take my purse." Cooper laughed. His mouth was covered by a hand, but I could see the smile. Those waiting in line moved uneasily. I gave her a serious look. I noticed that the thick makeup was settling into her facial creases. I witnessed the desperate attempt to win over strangers. I witnessed the complete insincerity of a lady who would degrade her partner on an app in exchange for 40 likes. I said, "You want me out of the picture?" I spoke steadily. "Yes, Silas. God. Just go." She gave me a shooing gesture with her hand, as if I were a stray dog. Something clicked within of me. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of a heavy chain breaking at last. "Okay," I replied. I moved out of the picture. "Finally," she said as she put on her phony smile and turned back to the camera. I stayed behind the camera and said, "Okay, Cooper, ready?" Her purse was not taken by me. I simply continued walking after placing the bag on the grass near the photographer's foot. I strolled across the garden, past the tables adorned with pricey crystal and the splashing waterfalls. I refrained from running. I didn't stomp. I had the determined, fast gait of a man who had decided he was in the wrong place. I arrived at the estate's front valet stand. Startled, the young person behind the podium raised his head. The celebration has just begun. So far, no one was departing. So early to leave, sir? Taking my ticket, he inquired. Yes, I answered, passing him a $25 bill. An emergency. Can you acquire it quickly? He took off at a jog. I checked my pockets as I stood there. Phone, wallet, and apartment keys. Everything that mattered was with me. My Audi arrived 2 minutes later. I took a seat behind the wheel. The leather remained heated. I made mirror adjustments. I could see the party's far-off white tents in the reflection. I pictured Hazel standing there, tipping her chin down and grinning for the camera, not realizing that her bankroll and ride home were currently putting the car in gear. I turned onto the main street. I anticipated the rush of sadness as soon as the tires touched the pavement. I anticipated the heartache. I didn't experience the terror of thinking, oh my God, I just left my girlfriend at a winery. As an alternative, I experienced a sensation in my chest that I hadn't had in 2 years. I felt as though a bulky, damp wool coat had been removed from my shoulders. I inhaled deeply. Clean, chilly air was blasted into my face by the air conditioner. I switched on the radio, but it wasn't the top 40 music station Hazel insisted on listening to since it kept her energized. I put on an economics podcast. There were no vibes at all, and it was dry and dull. It was paradise. I was driving down the interstate for 40 minutes when my phone buzzed against the center console. Then it buzzed once again. Then I looked at the screen, a third time. 3 calls were not returned. 1 text message, Hazel. I didn't respond, Hazel. I didn't even open the phone. I was fully aware of what was taking place. The photo session was over. They were now at the bar. In order to buy her new acquaintances a round of drinks, she had reached for her clutch. Perhaps she had just noticed that I was no longer carrying her purse. I continued to drive. The texts intensified 10 minutes later. Where are you, Hazel? Stop making jokes, Hazel. Return. Cooper's camera needs to be charged. Really, Silas and Hazel, you're making me look foolish. You went where? About 10 meters from the city limits. I stopped at a rest area. I had to take care of the logistics and I needed gas. At last, I picked up the phone after parking the car. 12 texts were now present. The tone had changed from irritation to fear. Then Mia sent the text. Hazel's best friend of the month was Mia. Everything was made possible by her. Constantly whispering in Hazel's ear that she was a star and that she deserved better. Where the devil are you, Mia? Hazel is in tears. You destroyed the entire atmosphere. Return now and come get us. I gazed at the text. Hazel is in tears. That statement would have caused me to turn the car around a week ago. I would have expressed regret. I would have pleaded for pardon. To wipe away her tears, I would have driven back at 90 miles per hour. However, I read it today as though it were a supply chain report. She is crying, but why? It wasn't that she missed me that made her cry. My features wrecked her aesthetic, she had just told me. She was concerned for my safety, which is why she wasn't sobbing. She hadn't contacted me to inquire about my crash. She was crying since she was in a secluded vineyard 100 miles from home. On a Saturday night, Uber soared to almost $200 for that distance. She had no automobile. Cooper was not a driver. And most all, I discovered with terrible, gloomy delight that she had no money. For emergencies, I had provided her with an additional credit card on my MX account. She used it for brunch in Sephora. The purse I left on the grass had the card. I launched the banking app. Active status. Current pending charge, $0. I select the Manage Cards tab. Hazel Supplementary is what I chose. Freeze the card. Indeed. Report stolen or missing property. Indeed. Reason. The user is no longer permitted. The card had died. I revisited Mia's text. I carefully typed my response, checking that every word was correct. Me. I was spoiling the picture, she said. I therefore took myself out of the photo. I'm nearly at home. Cooper should be instructed to take an Uber. He has the money, I'm sure. I sent it. Then I did something months ago that I ought to have done. I looked at my list of contacts. Block the caller, Hazel. Block the caller, Mia. Block caller, Cooper. I got a black coffee, put the phone down, and put premium gas in the tank. The silence was lovely when I returned to the flat. The time was 7 p.m. It would take them at least 100 minutes to return if they were able to find a ride. If they had to wait so long for a car to take them, it would probably be longer. I didn't take a seat. I headed directly to the closet. Her garments weren't burned by me. They weren't cut up by me. It's dramatic. And I had had enough of drama. From beneath the sink, I retrieved 3 boxes of sturdy garbage bags. I entered the bedroom. I grabbed her skincare items from the vanity and placed them in a bag. I took all of her clothing off the hangers, including the luxury jackets I had purchased for her, the silk dresses, and the elegant neutrals, and I piled them into bags. Shoes were placed in a different bag. I did my job well. Living room, bathroom, and bedroom. I removed the vision board she had placed in the corridor. I removed the ring lamp that she had placed in the living room's corner. 12 big black garbage bags were waiting in the corridor outside our apartment door by 8:30 p.m. They weren't placed in the dumpster by me. I had no intention of discarding them. I had just kicked them out. I visited the router. I pressed the reset key. 404 not found for the new network name. A fresh password. Only I knew this complicated string. I took a seat on the sofa. The apartment appeared larger. It had a cleaner appearance. It resembled my apartment once more. It buzzed on my phone. My bank app sent me the notification. The transaction was rejected. Uber Technologies $210 card with the last 4 digits 402. I grinned. The transaction was rejected. Uber Technologies is worth $210, card with a 402 at the end. She was making an effort. She was in a difficult situation. Then Venmo sent a panicked message. Ask. Hazel asks for $220. Memo. Please. Silas. I can't get my card to function. We're stuck. Put an end to your insanity. I turned down the request. Approaching the front door, I pressed the deadbolt. Then I activated the bulky security chain I had put in place when we moved here, which she detested due to its unsightly appearance. I opened a beer and cooked a sandwich in the kitchen. 10:45 p.m. And counted for 8:45 p.m. The elevator's ding reached my ears. I heard someone falling over a garbage bag after hearing heavy, irate footsteps. What the hell? The voice of Cooper. Next, the voice of Hazel. My attire. Is this stuff that belongs to me? Silas. She hammered on the door. Now, Silas, open this door. This isn't amusing. I stayed put. I watched TV while lounging on the couch. I know you're in there, Silas. The internet isn't working. My card didn't function. In order to pay for the Uber, Cooper had to call his mother. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was? Disgraceful? The word was that. I made my way to the door. I didn't open it. Through the wood. I spoke. I said, Hazel, you have your stuff. You have the aesthetic, and you have Cooper. You are no longer living in an apartment. The lease has my name on it. There is no record of you as a tenant. This is not something you can do. She let out a scream. Now she was clearly crying. Actual tears. Tears of panic. Where should I go? I said, go to Cooper's. He has a vision. He probably has an idea of where you'll be spending the night. Silas. He lives on a couch. There is no room for him. It sounds like a logistical issue. I returned to the bedroom, put on my noise-canceling earphones, and turned off the light after saying, good night, Hazel. For 20 more minutes, she pounded. After a while, I heard the elevator ding once more, and then I heard plastic bags being dragged. I had a restful night's sleep. The loudest month of my life was the first month of silence. Hazel didn't communicate with me directly, at least not in a way that called for an answer. My digital perimeter was secured. The number was altered. Social's private email filters are configured to send everything that contains her name straight to the trash folder. However, the quiet wasn't meaningless. The noises of someone scratching frantically as they realized the walls were closing in filled it. The flying monkeys were the first to appear. Others of our mutual acquaintances, primarily hers, but also others I thought were mine, were contacting me to see how I was doing. Hello, Silas. I heard about it just now. That is absurd. Man, Hazel is in a lot of pain. Her lodging is in a motel. Do you believe you two could have a conversation? Block. You can't just leave someone you lived with, Silas. Her birth certificate is required.